rather than doing a long-winded intro like I do on some podcasts, I thought we'd get straight into it. So I'm just going to start and ask Severin, what is a dark retreat?
Hi, John. A dark retreat is an ancient practice, and you can imagine a hermetically locked room where no light source can enter. And that room is a place where you're going in for a prolonged amount of time. So maybe what comes close to that is like a samadhi tank or like a floating tank where you would go in for 50 or 90 minutes. Now imagine you have a room where you're actually having a bed, you're having a shower, and you're receiving meals through kind of a door, and you have like a normal, like livable room, but more like in a simplified version, like a cave where you have a ventilation system that you're provided with everything that you need. But the difference is that you are taking away your most important sensory organ, which is the eyes. And therefore you have to face yourself. And I mean, there's a lot more to say, but that gives you a very basic idea what a dark retreat is.
Okay. Interesting. So I've always wondered, like when I hear you talking about that, I'm like, what about, like you said, there's food and there's a shower. How do you eat food? Like, is it completely pitch black? Like there's no candles, no light of any kind, and you have to figure out how to eat and how to shower in there?
Yes. So imagine like you are arriving at a place where a dark retreat is provided. And so let's say, for example, like my clients they have arrived yesterday. They're landing on my property and we're going in tomorrow in the dark retreat. And of course it has candles, it has lights, but there's no electricity there. So there's no wiring, there's no Wi-Fi. So it's like a completely separated room that's just dedicated for a dark retreat. And so I go with them inside and explain them everything in the facility. And so when you are ready, then you can blow off the candle. And that's an experience all unparalleled to something that you know, because we think like, oh yeah, I've been going on a hike or I've been spending time in nature. I know darkness. But when there's no light source, it's pitch black and you can actually have your eyes open or close and there's no difference. And so the closest that we come in life to have experienced that is when we have been in the womb of our mothers. And so it brings us back to a very primordial experience that we're familiar with. And so there's a sense of remembering when you go into that, but you have forgotten. And so eating, for example, is something that you then explore. So it's like you're familiar, for example, like the food in your mouth, but it's like there's no divided attention. So for me, for example, one of the first times I went in, I couldn't remember what papaya is, even though I was, of course, having eaten it many times. I was like, what is it that I'm having in my mouth for breakfast? And it took me 3 days to figure it out.
Oh, wow. Because you can't see the food. So you don't actually know, you can't identify what the food is from eating. So you have to be that's so interesting. You have to be so present with what you're eating. Otherwise, you don't know what you're eating. That's so bizarre. That's such a trip.
It's a very joyful experience, especially with food, because it's like a surprise. It's like, wow, what's awaiting me today? Is it savory? Is it sweet? And that is exactly what you're saying. Like that's one of there's many benefits or many beautiful aspects about it, but it makes you so present because you don't know. You just have to explore and it's directly to your tongue and your mouth that you're figuring out what's actually in your mouth. So it's a very direct experience. It's a very straightforward sensation.
Yeah. So it reminds me of, I've never done this personally. I have heard about them. I've talked about them. I've read about them, but I haven't done it yet. But it does sound a little bit like a float tank. Like if I get into I've done a float tank a few times where I get in, you got the water there, but you're still in there and you're only in there for an hour or 2 hours or something. You shut the door, but it's all pitch black. You're meant to be weightless. So it's almost heading in that direction. But this sounds like this is a whole other level.
Absolutely. I mean, if you would do a prolonged amount of time in the float tank, then you'll be dried out with all the salts and minerals you have in the water. But it's a beautiful experience to prepare. For me, it's a great preparation and integration, like the floating tank, but nothing close. Like imagine that you're walking in the darkness, like instead of floating. And the floating gives you much more a sense of like a sense of oneness or dissolution. It's beautiful and it's relaxing. But the dark retreat, like you're staying, ideally, you would stay for several nights. So imagine like I mean, traditionally, if you go in the Christian tradition, you go for 40 days in, and then the Buddhist tradition for 49. So that's quite long. So I would recommend more like a shorter period of time, like 4 nights. But when you're really having the whole spectrum of the human emotions coming up and where you're sleeping, like you have a whole other levels of experiences, which the floating tank doesn't come close. And we haven't even talked yet about the, the brain chemistry or what's actually happening inside of you.
So you're saying, so to start off with, do say 4 days, but in the Buddhist and Christian traditions, there's people who would go in and do 40 days, like a month and a half, basically inside the darkness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Have you done that yet?
I haven't done that myself. Like my longest has been 10 days, but I have done many dark retreats over the last 10 years. And my understanding of it is like a long dark retreat is definitely like something that is great to do, but it's not so much about the length necessarily.
So what is it about? Like, if I'm listening to this, I'm thinking, okay, this sounds cool. Maybe I don't know too much about it, right? Like maybe is it like mushrooms? Is it like ayahuasca or DMT? What's the point here? Why would you just go into the dark? It sounds pretty boring on the surface level, but there's obviously a reason to do this. I'm curious, how do you describe it to people? If they said that, why? What's the point?
Well, the point is not for me to convince you to do that. This is not a product that I'm selling to you and like have to tell you this is why you do it. If that's the case, then you're not my client, actually. If you have a calling and you feel intrinsic, like, longing for that, that's much more the person I'm looking for, and actually figuring out with you, how long do you want to go inside? I'm not your expert telling you what you need. It's actually much more getting in touch with you and figuring out what is right for you. What I can say though, like to speak about the dark retreat, is like, imagine when you're coming into a place that is like a womb, and the place is the closest you come to safety. So it's like, there's nothing you have to do, like no responsibility, like you having being food provided for you. And you can really, like, you don't have to care about, what other people's opinions are. Like there's nothing that you have to tend to other than yourself. So for the nervous system, this is a deep sense of relaxation. It's a deep winding down, and it's a deep sense of just coming within yourself, like a sense of presence. And in that, actually, like in the first times when I explored that, my whole body was just so nurtured. Like it was so grateful, and I couldn't understand what's happening because my nervous system was just slowing down, and there was a deep sense of safety, a deep sense of centering, and just so much clarity, and also coming back to my own authority of like, oh my God, like I was so attuned to my surrounding and running around and being so stressful, and suddenly I find myself really like centered back within me. And that was such a healing experience that I only now can put words to, like many years later. But it's a sensory experience that is really bringing you home back into yourself. And so why you would do that? Because it really takes everything away and it brings you back home to yourself.
The one question I have is like, I've had a lot of these experiences with, like for me, the doorway has often been, it's always been psychedelics, like I've meditated a lot as well, but it was always when I used certain techniques and say took mushrooms or took LSD or took ayahuasca, and I have these incredible experiences that would helped me to access like a part of myself that I felt like that was totally new and so amazing and fantastic, but also totally familiar, more like it's something I forgot. So, and not something that was like a delusion or a fantasy or a hallucination, but something that was more real than my day-to-day experience. And so the challenge with it though is I can have that, and then afterwards it slowly fades away usually. Every time. And I'm always like, how do I access that or cultivate that? Because it's so beautiful. And so I guess the question is, how, like, did it last or does it last? How do you find after you come out, you have that experience afterwards, what happens?
Yeah, this is a big topic you're talking about. And for me, it comes down to integration. So a dark retreat is not comparable to a psychedelic experience or a plant medicine experience, because you are not taking a substance, you are the substance. So you're going in with yourself and you're taking away everything that is taking your attention. And therefore the only way like that you have to come back to something that's essential, or like that's like really there for you, that you can come back to. And so in the darkness, this is really the biggest challenge. You're facing death. You're facing the unknown, you're facing the darkness. And so, yes, integration is happening, but imagine, like, I would say for me, like when I use psychedelics, and I'm still working with them, I find amazing and beautiful, like, medicines that they are not to be, like, I'm not saying they are not good, in the contrary. And for me, they're much more like, imagine like when we have an armor around our parts that we have maybe suppressed. And we have suppressed them for good reasons, in my opinion. Like in my childhood, I was trying to get the love of my father or my mother, or maybe even my family, and therefore certain parts were not allowed. When you take psychedelics, this armor is like pushed away and you blast through and you go very quickly to an experience that's beyond that, is transcendental, and it's like it leaves you at a place where there is oneness, and there is like a sense of knowing, and you're connected to everything. And for me, it's like very often I come back from that immense, beautiful, and really like, it's almost like a sense of like, it's so natural, like everything is just open and clear. And I come back to my limitation, and in the sense of that huge, like, like peak, let's say, and coming back to my reality where I'm actually at, there's a sense of depression of like how far away I am from my potential. In the dark retreat, imagine like you going inside and the darkness itself, like there's nothing that pushes you to that next level. Instead, actually, it's very, very slow. And that's one of the most beautiful things about a dark retreat. It's very slow. And when we speak about integration, it's actually not about getting somewhere. It's not about getting rid of something either. Like it's not about healing. It's much more about befriending. And it's easy to say. I'm still in the process of that. It took me 10 years. But actually, there's nothing to get rid of. And therefore, this very armor that the psychedelics like push through in order to get to such an absolute experience, that very armor, let's say your emotions, your fears, your anger, your sadness and your grief, and your joy as well. They are human emotions that make you exactly who you're meant to be. And you have a lot of time in the dark to be with them. And that's really the most challenging part, actually, to feel them rather than to intellectually go somewhere. And so it's a very somatic experience to be with that, because there's nowhere else to go. So all your escape strategies, your numbing and dissociation comes to the surface. And so can you be with yourself? And that's normally not taking just one dark retreat. It's more a practice, but it emphasizes and it highlights what is already there underneath, and it brings it to the surface, and it wants to be felt, it wants to be seen. And therefore the integration when you come out, because you're working with that, you have no choice, is actually much more gentle. Of course, I'm also like, when I came out, there's a tendency of like breaking the fast. You're going into eating pizza and wanting to have dessert, and then you realize that was too fast. But it's like, even then, can you slow down? And so the emphasis is much more on the integration and then on the peak experience. So in my experience from my clients as well, it's like they have a sensation of safety, of connection, and of having moved through so many ups and downs that when somebody asks, how was it? It's like you cannot even give an answer. It was so rich. And so the experience lasts much longer in my eyes if you're willing to slow down when you come out. And I feel that actually relates to the psychedelic world as well, like the integration and slowing down after. That's the very same approach in my eyes, which is a little bit, I think it's just coming to the surface more and more that we are paying more attention to integration.
And what does what do you mean by integration?
I mean, for me, integration, like it's actually really respecting the journey of each individual. So there's not a standard procedure where you can say, this is like what integration means. But integration for me would be much more like respecting where the person is at. That can be like, for some people, like it took me, for example, a long time to even find language for what my needs are. I had to cross my boundaries a lot and feel the pain of of not respecting my needs before I can even speak about them. And so integration would then mean that maybe that you're just learning to even feel that without having words yet for that. For another person, they can already work on, hey, can I speak with you, or can I have your help? And like you're expressing a need. So that's like in a very practical example, that would look like integration for somebody means they signed up for a 7-day dark retreat and they need to say that they want to come out on day 6, because they need to learn that it's for them the most healing approach is actually that they can say that they're in charge. While for another person, it would be really good if they can actually integrating more by really applying their practice of working more on exercises and expressing their anger, and they stay actually with that for a day longer. So what I want to say, integration is not something that is, this is working for everybody. Integration is very, very individual. And for me, normally it's like, it's really slowing down and actually sensing, like it's almost pausing and coming back to the sense rather than to the story.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Like it's kind of like, one person has an issue with boundaries, another person has, and they don't have any boundaries at all. So they like do too much. And then the other person, the boundaries are way too strong. They don't open up. They don't do enough. Mm-hmm. And you got someone else who doesn't know how to cry and someone else who's, you all these different issues. And so the integration is what's relevant for them at their stage. So integration can really be anything depending on where they're at. But it sounds like a big part of it, and this is to jump back to something you said, was it's not about fixing things or healing even. I mean, this is the tricky thing about this work I find, is that there is I don't know what else you would call it, like awakening or, opening to some of these more transcendent or grander realities about ourselves. Like there's a sense of healing. That's one word for it. But then at the same time, I've had to learn this over and over again, that when I try and fix it, when I try and change it, when I'm feeling something and I'm trying to get rid of it, it does not work. Whereas lately the thing has been, this came out of a podcast I listened to recently, The Art of Accomplishment, where they were talking about savoring your experience. So if there's fear or there's anger or there's doubt or there's the different experiences, to not feel it to get rid of it, but to savor it and enjoy it and delight in it, because in that there is so much freedom, either in that or on the other side of that. But it's this different way of working where there is healing there, but going into it like, I'm going to heal this thing, gets in the way of the thing releasing or healing, whatever you want to call it. That's the paradox of this work.
Yeah, I'm grateful that you're bringing that up, and I can see that that's part of your work where you become very alive. And what I want to say about that is like I think healing, like as a society, that's where we come from, and like kind of this original sin of like there's something wrong with you to be born, like from the first place with Christianity, and that's it's more a collective imprint that's wrong, and we individually finding out that that's not the case. And I think it's only by finding out, by also trying it in the first place. So the way I see it, like let's say in my case, and I'm curious if you can relate to that, but I went completely the extreme of like going away from my place, like in Switzerland, and really going on a spiritual journey and going hardcore into like, like in a sense of like witness consciousness, all about awareness, and really going so far away from my personality and trying to be very strongly enlightened. Obviously, it didn't work out at all. I failed on that. But I see it that way, that we have such a pain, all of us. Like there's an original wound, let's say, but also through that wound comes our gift. It's the same place. But that wound in the beginning, it's almost like the emotions or the feelings for me, they have been overwhelming. I was not wanting to go back to them. That was like the scariest thing on the earth. So I went to the complete opposite extreme. And I think when you go into psychedelics or just meditation, like anything that's like transcendental, that fulfills a deep part in our human longing. But from that witness consciousness, when you go so far away, you're realizing that there's another domain that is also safe. But then from there, it's actually coming into embodiment again and coming back to that emotion which were so scary in the first place. But now you can come back with the capacity without merging with that you lose yourself in that emotion, but you can actually go so close and still have authenticity and authority over yourself. Like it's like a kind of you going closer and closer, and the fear comes up simultaneously that you will lose yourself, but actually you're realizing that you're growing in that endeavor. And I feel like in that sense, like that coming into your human emotions and feelings and the fullness of who you are to really step into, I think that's for me much more worthy to really become like daring of like, how can I be myself and with all on all levels. And that's scary.
What's witness consciousness?
Witness consciousness, like let's say it that way, for me is like awareness is when you can look at something. So the witness consciousness is basically the capacity, even now that we are talking with each other or somebody's listening, you have your own thoughts while you're listening to one of our voices. So therefore you can witness that there is an emotion, let's say you're hungry or you want to go to the toilet right now, is coming up simultaneously, that something is happening. So it gives you the capacity to not merge with what's happening. But then at the same time, it brings up the question, well, if I'm not just my emotions, if I'm not just my thoughts, and I'm not just my body, like, well, who the fuck am I?
I mean, this is like, I went through this for a long time. I was meditating every day. And this is where these experiences started, was playing with, who am I? What am I? Self-inquiry with psychedelics. And that was when these things would happen. And some of it was great, but at the same time, it was that, like in the somatic world would say, like disassociative, or I didn't realize just how disconnected I was from my physical self, from my body, from my feelings. I could connect into this other empty awareness space, and it was great. And I'm so proud, and I thought I was so evolved, and maybe not enlightened, but certainly thought I was pretty good spiritually. And then it all sort of fell apart at one point. I started getting into a bunch of shit happened, and started working with my body, and was like, oh my God, this is like this whole other thing. Instead of like going up, it was like coming down. And the interesting thing about it was, I remember once being on a farm, and I'm like, one of the things I've learned to do with this somatic stuff is that there's your fight or flight, there's a fight response. Sometimes how that likes to express is it wants to imagine you see a dog, it's growling, so I'm beating my chest like a fucking gorilla. And I'm doing this on this farm, and it's very organic, and it's not contrived like I'm making myself do it. It's like, this is what my body wants to do right now, so I'm going to do it. Like a gorilla, and then like crouching around, running around on this farm. And I remember feeling so alive in that moment, like so embodied, so connected to, I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it, talking about it, but so like often with those like awareness things, I could drop into this other, it's like a different dimension where like everything is fine, but I'm not here, I'm not on earth. Yes. And then there was this, I'm like 100%, I'm so on earth. And yet it's a similar type of, it's not a disassociated thing, but it's the same sort of, I'm so alive. This feels so like, oh, this is it right here. But instead of going up, which is the typical spiritual, we are up into the heavens. This was like down into the animal side, the beast, And so it's been such a maybe a similar journey to you of that. Okay, learning there is this witness thing, this awareness, pure awareness that I can be in, but that's not the whole answer. There's a lot more to this game, where a lot of it seems to be the missing piece for a lot of people. For me, was the body, is the body of feeling.
What brought you to that, that shift from, let's like in language, like when you come from this self-inquiry and you're watching, it's almost like an observer, it has this neutrality and kind of distance to it, where you just check it out from a safe place, versus like you come into this place, like actually, I really want to feel it and go so close, and it enlivens me by actually harnessing the energy that's in that feeling and sensation. So it's not anymore watching it from far, but actually going very close, and it's like a felt sense. Like, when did that shift for you?
I mean, for me, it probably started back in 2015. I read a book called The Presence Process, and that was starting to open up this idea of what am I actually feeling? Not just, zenning out, but like, what does the feeling feel like? A felt sensation. But that didn't really go too far. It wasn't until 2020, so another 5 years later, I came across the world of nervous system healing, somatic experiencing, all of that. And that was when it really kicked in. I'm like, oh this is like a whole different thing. And I started to feel when I would engage, like I could meditate for a few hours and get very calm. I'd done that. But then this was like I remember like in the beginning kind of going, when I did this practice, like I would feel, it was like my soul landing in my body. It's like instead of all being up here, I didn't even realize I was up here until it all came down. And I'm like, oh, wow, I just feel like I just spread out through my entire body. I didn't even know that was possible. I just thought how I was how I was, that was how I was meant to be. So it started there. 5 years, 4.5 years ago now. When did it start for you?
It started for me, I would say about 3 years ago, through like what some call the dark night of the soul, or like the separation of a divorce. And the retreat center, the hermitage that I'm leading, that I'm offering for so many people as a safe place to find themselves. And I have many stories like what you were just sharing, of like really coming into your body here. And it became my own place to land, like to find a safe place to actually land within myself, because like the separation from my ex-wife and then her moving with my children, or our children, back to her home country, like it was so painful. I didn't realize how much this will be taken away. And then suddenly the retreat center, or my image of like what I'm offering was not relevant anymore because I couldn't hold anymore the space for others. Like my capacity was just reduced, and I found myself on my knees. And it's by having been taken away of a lot of things that took for granted, and like from the outside looked like I had a very happy life, I realized that I was not. Like I was intending to so many others, but not to myself. And so it came the hard way of really learning to feel again and to take care of myself. And so I had to really reduce everything that I offered, and actually what I call now holding space for others. Like it's only because I have been going through the very same challenges and difficulties, and darkness as what I'm offering. So it's still a process. It's still going, and then also I don't know. For me, actually, that very journey on a very spiritual quest, going into the monastery and what you call like this upward journey, for me, it's actually part of it. I feel like it was a part of learning to cultivate capacity to actually land in my body. I wouldn't be here without that first part. So. And I have become an expert in spiritual bypassing. So I can share a lot about that because I've done it myself.
You brought up an interesting point there where like you're talking about, so you got the retreat center and then you go through this divorce and your kids leaving and the pain of that. I'm not sure if I'm projecting or assuming things, but was there a sense of like, on the one hand, you're like the guy who's teaching people about this stuff. You're running the dark retreats. You've had meditation retreats, and then here you are going through this dark night of the soul. Did that bring up like a kind of almost like imposter syndrome? I guess would be the mainstream word for it. Of feeling like, because I don't want to project this onto you because I know I have this, right? Like I'm just like you in the sense of shit still, I'm still got my own challenges, my own things that I'm working on. And yet I'm also, Rage Hard is an attempt to teach what I've learned to other people as well. And so there are times when I feel like I've got it and I'm good at this and, when my life's going well, but it's not always like that. Like I still have, issues, challenges, things I'm working through. And so sometimes I have this like, this right now it's happening periodically. There'll be this like wave of, and I seem to be in it right now, a wave of just shit, man, like doubt and fear, and you shouldn't be doing this, and no one's gonna like this. This is never gonna work. Like that kind of stuff comes in. Do you ever get that kind of stuff?
Of course. I mean, that's what the whole nuanced way is of understanding when you lead through somebody through a process of initiation. It's not about just going far away and going into safe distance and having like going into like, I'm fine, everything is working out. It's actually like, I'm also like, for example, I'm doing men's work since 3 years as well. It's another part that came in. I had to learn to ask for help. It's like this, especially as a man. I don't know if how you relate to that, but I had a feeling I need to do it all myself and I have to figure it out and I have to be strong. And it's the same in a dark retreat. Like it's not about being strong. It's about being like real, and that means like gentle and vulnerable with yourself, and that means like being able to share and even find language for some of the parts that I couldn't even identify and feel in the first place. So I didn't have so much an imposter syndrome, but there was such a deep like I didn't know anymore actually what I'm supposed to do, because I created such a perfect world with family and children and a retreat center and dark retreat growing. But that role of me, of like people looking at me as an authority or like as an expert, was really being taken away. And I never liked that in the first place. So I actually started to share much more about my own journey. And it's even like telling other people in my newsletter, like how dark my inner world is or how confused I am. And for some people, it's like, why would you share that? That doesn't make you trustworthy. Like people will not come to your dark retreat. Like it's not a good selling point. And for me, it's like, no, it's the opposite. Like if you want to do that, a dark retreat with me, then you need to know that I have been going through that myself. So there's nothing that you need to hide or to pretend. It's like in the contrary, like everything is welcome of you to come here. I'm not fixing it. I'm not doing it for you. I'm just holding a safe place for you to go through, but I know what that means. And I have tools, but also like, I'm just here because I'm on the same journey with you. I'm not the expert.
That's beautiful. I mean, it, so much for me, I think after having some of those experiences with psychedelics, with these blissful, whatever you want to call those things, what developed was like almost like an attempt to recreate that and to just be in that all the time, which I think it's pretty common.
Yes.
And then instead, I think if only I could just be in that 100% of the time. I'd just be good and life would be fucking fine and dandy forever, happily ever after. And then, but it's almost like looking at those experiences now, like I see them as almost maybe glimpses is a word, like a glimpse of what's possible as a human being for us to experience. But then the real work of actually, like now I moved to Peru and I've been working quite intensely with some of these plants now. And it's exactly like what you said. I see it in the people that I work with here, my teachers, where they're not in this blissful state all the time at all. They're actually just more human than most people I know, because it's just, it's not about being happy all the time or always feeling confident, always feeling like you've got it together. It's about being willing to just feel all of it, whatever that is.
Yeah.
And it doesn't necessarily look the way, like, you know, I've had these ideas of I'd think, oh, the teacher or whoever, they should be better. It's like, well, maybe they're just a human being. They're just real and they have their challenges, you know? So
yeah, I appreciate that you bring that up, because then it's like you don't need to do a dark retreat. It's life. And the dark retreat is just a symbolic place where you have no escape. And some of the voices that you haven't listened to because you push them away, because you're so busy and you have your schedule and your responsibilities and you're drinking your daily coffee and you're getting your, dopamine. And so therefore you don't even have to touch actually the unprocessed sadness or the fear, or your automatic, getting busy in order to not feel or to be avoidant. That's what's all coming up in the dark. And so it's just a container for that. But ultimately, and that's also like to bring it back to what you're just sharing. Like I'm doing, for example, now I'm doing it, and I think you have done it as well, right? Like no sugar. I'm doing that since 5 months. And there's a plainness in that. It's like the excitement of like this is so delicious, or like this sends me on a high, and then like the sugar is kind of coming down. So then like I'm having a drop and I need to take something else. Like this excitement is just how the world works. It's like look at a movie like 10 years ago, or look at Walt Disney movie 20 years ago. It's boring to what we're able to consume today. And so it's actually coming back to find happiness in a much more plain place, or what I would call on a nervous system, like being on a regulated level, and then actually find that versus looking, and that's what I'm still healing from, like going to unhealthy nervous system because they send me on a spike and it tells me it's exciting, but actually I'm just looking for trouble. And so a dark retreat is a nervous system regulation place where you can really find again, what does it mean to be healthy and balanced? Obviously, you will lose that again, but you have a memory of how that feels inside of you. And therefore you can come back to that because you can relate to it from a felt place and not something external.
It's funny you mentioned sugar. Like right now I've been doing the carnivore diet for like 6 weeks on Saturday. So that's no sugar. No, amazing. I mean, I don't drink coffee anyway. I rarely drink cacao because that puts me on edge. So, but carnivore means no sugar, there's no potato, no fried, like no carbs whatsoever of any kind. Even dairy, which is delicious, just doesn't work for some reason. It just, I guess I have some sort of intolerance to dairy. So I've ended up with like, I've got red meat and eggs, I hope are okay. I think might be okay. And that's it. And so it's kind of like, okay. And there's that. And that's why I wonder if right now, like I'm having so much of this mental, just stuff, this, I come through.
Absolutely.
I'm like, there's just very little, I don't watch porn anymore, like that's another thing, a lot of guys, it's a very addictive thing people get into. I used to be into it, but that's just gone. I'm not interested.
Amazing.
I remember months ago, I was like feeling this, like, I was just sick of processing stuff, sick of feeling feelings. I was like, I need a break. I just want a break. So I'm like, I'm going to get drunk. I went and bought a bottle of whiskey and drank half of it one night just to be like, let's see if this works. Let's see if this gives me, and I wasn't very fun at the time. And then I just felt shit for, a week. I did the same thing with sugar. I was like, let me go eat a bunch of sugar and see if that helps. Same thing. Like it's at this point where I'm like, I don't want to do these things anyway. But then the result is that I feel like I'm just in it so often. And I have to be like, oh, let's just, I've been watching a little bit of Netflix this week just because it's like, okay, if anything, my personality is more like even getting into this somatic stuff was doing too much rather than too little, like spending too much time feeling, which they recommend against that, So, okay, like it's like reps in the gym, go and do some reps, do some squats, and then take a break. So I have to remember that. But it's just funny you mentioned sugars. I'm like, I've just taken away so many of the things that I would use to soothe my neuroses. And so then it all is just like, oh, here we are. Now we can start to tell you what's up.
Yeah. I have similar experiences to relate on some levels. Like when you take away what you just said, like what numbs your neurosis, how you call it. Like, yeah, I mean, our addictions, and for good reasons, like they're there to start to see them. And I see that's also, so to bring it back to the dark retreat, like when you have love, like somebody that loves you, like only in that container where, let's say you have, an exciting new partner and you go on a date and having fun and like that honeymoon phase is getting over, because there's so much joy and ease and curiosity, then actually you're giving the perfect environment for all the emotions and feelings that have been hiding before, that can come to the surface in order to be processed. And that's what actually real healing is. And it's not about getting rid of that. It's not about detoxing and getting it out of the system, but that's where it becomes to me. And that's where I'm in of like, yeah, it's like the shadow is not something negative or something dark. It's just something that I have pushed away and I have rejected. And so it's actually also our biggest gift, our biggest potential to welcome back in again. And like you do, like you say so beautifully, like you're naming some of I'm watching Netflix, I have been drinking alcohol. Like that's just me. That's the whole spectrum. You have a quality of sharing that. And I think that just makes me more trustworthy, or like make me trusting you more, because I know you name the whole spectrum. It's there anyway, but you can actually name it. And I feel, yeah, same here. Like I'm not perfect at all. And that's like to name that and share that and feeling home in that. That's what I'm aiming to come a little bit closer. Yeah. In the days, weeks, month. Yeah.
It has changed though. Like, I mean, like years ago when I used to live in Thailand, I'd be smoking cigarettes and drinking and partying and porn and coffee and all the, not too much sugar. Sugar was never really my main thing, but to some degree,
sugar was my main thing.
Interesting. Yeah.
Oh,
when I was in a relationship, what kind of sugar?
When I was a child, like smaller, I would go to the candy shop, these lollipop shops, and like all this sugar coated like gummy stuff. I would eat that to a degree where my stomach would go upside down and I wouldn't feel any feelings and emotions anymore. And I would feel good, because then it's like, okay, I'm done. I'm good now. So I would do that regularly. But yeah, all sorts of sweets. So for me, like I have done a lot of detox and like diets and, meditation, yoga and breathwork and everything, but no sugar. That's a first for me.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. Yeah. I mean, sugar, when I was in a relationship, it was like I ate a lot more sugar because she really liked to have sugar. So we'd go out to this ice cream restaurant. We get all kinds of great stuff. But I think that was probably more just a relationship type of thing. It wasn't, sugar's never been my drug of choice, I suppose, for soothing emotions. I would have been more like cigarettes, alcohol to some degree, porn, definitely, coffee. What do you think about, you mentioned spiritual bypassing, but one thing I've seen in myself and in other people, that meditation, anything, any practice can be like this, but people often don't talk about how spirituality, spiritual ideas, spiritual practices can work. Same with fitness, like these things that are socially approved and seem positive can be just as addictive and just as disconnecting as sugar. What do you think about that?
Yeah, you're going into another big topic. Yes, I mean, I see that like when we speak about addiction, I mean, let's make it real. For example, like we're speaking right now through a screen to each other, and I see you, and screens is another addiction. And it's like you say, let's say, like alcohol, it's maybe more socially accepted. Let's say heroin, you wouldn't take anywhere in the streets, just whenever you want, and you're going in a plane or a train. Like you have to refrain because that's not okay. It's restricted. But then when we go to that, like screen, it's the most accepted addiction, because let's say whenever you are finished with watching your YouTube or your Reels or TikTok or Instagram, and you turn away the screen, like you're going away from the screen, you have to face after the dopamine hit of like, whoa, that was exciting, that was stimulating, that was, even listening to a podcast, I'm connected with a topic or like-minded people, my community. You turn away the screen and here you are alone again in many cases. And so the addiction nowadays for me is very much like there is a disassociation, like through using so many screens, and also like it's prone to freeze. Like it's like, let's say you watch a movie on Netflix for 2 hours. Like you're literally like you haven't moved in your body. And I think that's also like, let's say with meditation, it actually, and let's say silent retreats, which I have done a lot of and teach myself, like it's actually emphasizing this tendency to already isolate, to already numb, to disassociate, rather than actually having confronting, meaningful conversation. But that also means it's uncomfortable, like where you have emotions coming to the surface and somebody that needs to hold space for that. So to a degree, I would say personally, I have used that myself. It's like it's a safe container. I can sit in my meditation. Nobody challenges me. Like I don't have to feel too much. And I'm doing something very beneficial for my spiritual journey. Actually, like if you're honest, like you're just repeating some of the pattern that you're really good in rather than coming out of them. So yeah, it's a spiritual bypassing to a degree.
Yeah, it's so tricky because there's so much nuance. Like I've the last few months I've started. I used to swear I was like I hate social media. I don't want to touch it. I just don't like how it's so addictive and so sticky. But decided to start it up a few months ago for Rage Heart after chatting with a friend about it and actually having a lot of fun. Surprisingly, I'm like, this is really cool. It's creative. It's a bit of music. Like there's a lot of good there. I've met some interesting people who I wouldn't have otherwise met. So I can see there's positives there, but it's tricky because I try and talk about this on social media, how meditation can get in the way, it can be reinforcing certain negative patterns within a nervous system. But it's a 1 minute reel. So I'm trying to expand or explain quite a complicated topic because meditation can be, for the right person at the right time, can be incredibly beneficial. It's helped me in certain ways, but for the wrong person at the wrong time in certain situations, it can actually get in the way. And I saw this with myself. Like one story I tell is, I was in Thailand, I had a fight. I was dating this woman and we're in the car driving somewhere and we had a fight about, I can't even remember what it was about. She was getting all mad. She was getting angry, heated, firing up in the conversation. And I remember I was just so present. And I don't know if I was explicitly taking deep breaths, but I was sort of just in this almost like I was very present. I was there, but I was just staying very calm. I wasn't allowing myself to get angry. And at the time I was so proud. I was so, I'm so mature, look at her. She's all out of control with her emotions. And look at me. I'm like just so adult-like because I can stay calm in this and not get angry. And it was a few months after that is a long story, I suppose, but I eventually realized that, I was totally angry and probably anxious and upset. Like I was a whole bundle of emotions, but I couldn't show them to her because I'd hidden them from myself. And I look back on that and I think, man, I'd been meditating every day, just about sometimes for hours a day, a little bit, maybe 20 minutes a day for 10 years. And I missed it. Like I wasn't meditation that opened me up to my emotions. It was some, like the somatic stuff, some conversations with friends where I'm like, I do have feelings and meditating them away is not helping, And then I remember one time we had a conversation at months and months after that, like another fight type of thing. And I felt the emotion. And instead of shutting it down, I started crying. We're in this restaurant in public in Thailand or something. And I started crying in this restaurant because I'm like, well, this is just what's there. It's just what's coming. And okay, I'm sick of holding this in and pretending to myself that everything's okay. And so anyway, I just, I found that was such an interesting part of my journey that I could meditate that much and read so many spiritual books and do all this self-inquiry and yet be still so emotionally disconnected from myself to the point where it's not like I know it's there and I'm hiding it. It's like, I don't even know I'm feeling it. Didn't. So when I've seen that, I think, with other people who meditate or there can be this tendency that maybe they're very aware, there can be a great, really well-developed awareness, but it's somehow there's a disconnect somewhere. I don't fully understand it, but I know that it happens. So, and spiritual bypassing, basically, that's pretty much, there's books written about this. So, yeah. What are some other misconceptions about dark retreats?
Well, I can offer you a few. You can tell me what you want to go into. Like one is like, why would you pay for a place where you lock yourself in? Why would you do that? Another misconception is like that this is unhealthy for you. Like you need vitamin D, so sunlight, and therefore you should not do that. It's not good for your body. A common question is that, what if you go crazy? I like that one a lot. It's like, what if you go crazy? It's like, yeah, what if? And And yeah, I mean, is it for everybody? You know, that's a misconception. Like, I think that's something that we can also talk about. It's like, it's a very advanced practice, or a misconception is also like, just it gains more popularity right now doesn't mean that it's not new age. It's a very, very ancient tradition. So yeah, it's a very special topic to talk about. So that's some of the misconceptions.
So what if you go crazy?
Well, we have to speak about the concept of crazy, because what does it mean to go crazy? Like, if you would actually speak out loud to me what's happening in your mind out loud, then you would probably talk nonstop, or most of the people would talk nonstop. And in my eyes, or what I understand, like from a social perspective, that is going crazy. Going crazy is when you're just like, you don't have any limitations or social norms anymore, and you're blubbering out loud what's internally anyway alive. So craziness is actually when you're showing that. And yeah, I mean, to some degree, we could speak about more like when you have no control over it. And I'm not speaking about that. And then, yes, there's bipolar, and there is insomnia or like depression. And there are definitely like moments when I wouldn't recommend you to go in the dark retreat, actually in many ways. And that's where we have a screening and we have an attendance. But just in a normal sense of like all the voices inside your head, I mean, we're all actually a bit crazy. And actually, if you can relate to these voices in your head, or like if you can see them and start to acknowledge them, actually pay attention to them, that's when you start to build a relationship with yourself, rather than pushing them away because of a big fear that they could take over or go crazy. So it comes back to like, you actually want to allow everything, even the craziness. That's one of my, it's a personal story. Like, my mother has Alzheimer since 10 years. So when I grew up, my mother was not in a let's say, in a healthy emotional state to take care of her 3 children. She was a single mother when my parents separated when I was already a bit older. And so I witnessed my mother a lot of time when she was emotionally not stable. And I, as a young child, as the oldest brother with my sisters, I tried to hold space for her. So that's also nowadays why I'm doing what I'm doing. I've learned that very early. So my pain, my power. And yeah, I was very, very afraid of her going crazy. And so for me, it was part of my healing journey actually to go crazy in one of my dark retreats, to really lose control over my emotions and realize that I'm fine. It's like, and it also comes back to our society where it's like, you have to be treated, you have to have a condition, you have to have a brand, you have ADHD, like you have this and that. And I'm questioning that branding, because I feel in many cases like it can lead to an identification. Therefore, you're not listening what you need anymore, and you're just going with, let's say, some remedies and what you need to do, rather than actually as well as, let's say, the joy. You know, it's like you said, like the joy doesn't last all the time. The craziness also doesn't last forever. And to be with something like that is just, when we speak about somatics and be with a feeling, I love this term so much about when we feel happy, like we want to, or content, we want to let that feeling blossom and fill our entire body, to really let it, so it can dissolve again because it's fulfilled in itself. But when we speak about grief, sadness, or fear, we don't speak about that the same way applies of letting that feeling blossom until it exceeds its need to come to surface, and then it naturally decays again, because it's very, very uncomfortable. So if you go crazy, maybe it has a bigger meaning that you don't understand, and it actually can heal itself as well. And craziness is part of the human realm of expressions. So I'm not so concerned about that.
You know, it reminds me of, it's like we all have different ways with different emotions. Or like when sadness comes through for me, I don't cry very often, but when I do, I'm like all fucking in. I'm like, I'll fall over on the floor and sob it, like, it's great, it's glorious, I love it, and then it's gone, and it just disappears, And so for some reason,
that's a very healthy approach. That would be like, wow, who role modeled that for you? Why have you such a beautiful expression with that? Why can you, just feel it fully when it's there? And when it's not there, it's not there. How does it come?
I mean, so it's like that with me for sadness and anger.
Mm-hmm.
How does it come? I mean, one time was like, There's a funny story. We did some photos for my guy here who I drink San Pedro with. He was doing some photos for his website. So we got a group of people together down at one of the bed and breakfasts here. And we had it's not a real ceremony, but he had real San Pedro there and like a San Pedro Huachuma, this psychedelic cactus in a jug. And we sat around in a circle in this garden. It's a beautiful day, blue sky, gorgeous garden in this place called the Greenhouse. And he pours this, San Pedro into a cup and says, you don't have to drink any. It's just for the photos, but feel free to have some if you're so inclined. It wasn't like a full cup like we usually do for a ceremony. It was a bit. I'm like, I'll just have a mouthful, it'll be like a microdose. It'll be fine. And then I'll just go and have like a normal day. And for whatever reason, my little mouthful was not a microdose. And I got home a couple hours later, thought I was had a whole bunch of stuff I was going to do. And the second I walk inside, I'm like, I have to go outside. This is weird. Something's going on. And so it ended up being like a whole day of stuff feeling. But that night my sister's like, let's watch this movie. And I'm like, okay, looks pretty funny. Sounds good. We start the movie and something about probably me being slightly more open than I usually might have been a bit more sensitive. And then this movie was on a theme that just resonated with something going on in my life. And I was within like 10 minutes, I'm like sobbing and I'm crying for the rest of the movie. And then for another half an hour afterwards, it was great. For me, it's often been psychedelics. It's often come with, and then the last woman I dated, when that ended, was just as I was getting into the somatic, learning how to feel stuff, and that I don't know, man. I'd be like, I need to go and cry, and then I'd go put my headphones in, put some sad love songs on, and just cry for an hour, and then it just would run out. The reason I mention all of that, though, is because I get that with sadness, that if I go into it, like balls to the wall and just cry as hard as I can cry for as long as I need to, it just runs out of steam sooner or later. But I think I find it more difficult. And I wonder if different people are different like this. Like some people have a problem with grief.
Absolutely. Everybody is different. This is so beautiful. Yeah. What you're just sharing. Yeah.
Yeah. So that you take, like, I have thoughts right now of, it's less emotional. It's almost like a despair is like one word for it. It's not controlling me. It's not dominating me, but it's there. I'm aware of it. The thoughts are just give up. Like it's this very despair-like feeling. And I struggle to let that flow for some reason. The grief is okay, but the despair, I'm more like, oh, I don't like this very much. So it's just interesting.
Yeah, that's for me where it lies. Like if you can name that already, I mean, it's so good if you have, say, therapists. Like I'm in therapy. Like if you have a men's circle, if you have a woman's circle, if you have friends, if you have family, or like what you say, like good music or psychedelics. Like other people go to a football match, it's like there you have, like everybody has a place where you want to come to, that place where, let's say, that despair that you just named, which is for you like, it's almost like it cannot flow free. There's something that's kind of stuck, or it's like, it's not uninterrupted. Like you cannot come to the same place with like crying where it's a free flow. It dissolves naturally. It's like a stream of naturalness and it builds and then it goes, it does its own thing and it's welcoming me. Beautiful. But there's another part is like, there's something there. And that's where somatic goes in for me. It's like if you need a dark retreat, if you have a friend, if you go for a walk or a hike in nature, like what does it for you? That's more my question. But it's like come to this place and then rather going into the story of fixing it, it's like there's normally like something underneath that if you tune into that, where does it bring you? And that's a beautiful journey to really get to know each other. For me, that's like some of my closest friends, if they can become real or I can show that part of me, that feels so satisfying and fulfilling to me of like, wow, I get to know myself better. And my fear is like something is happening that will change me because I will not be the person anymore that I am right now. And so that's for me that inner parenting to a degree of really building capacity of feeling that again and coming to a flow again with it, or a little bit more at least.
Yeah. I mean, the way it shows up, this is if I go to like, because it seems like there's, in my direct experience, I like going, okay, what am I actually experiencing? There's thoughts and then there's sensations, and that's pretty much it. Like all the emotion is a sensation. That seems to be how it works. But so if I have these thoughts and then if I really drop in and feel what I'm noticing right now, not right now, this very second, but if I take 10 minutes or 15 minutes, or if I wake up at 2 a.m. in the morning, what's happening is my body's vibrating. And the way I would describe it to a friend, and he said he's got the same thing. So I've asked two friends this, and they've both got the same type of thing. And so I wonder if it's actually quite common. It's just very subtle that it's difficult to notice. But it's like, it's almost like the way my friend described it was, It's, when you take a car and you go on a really long drive and the car's vibrating and it's like, and you just tune it out. You just get used to it. But then you drive for a few hours and you finally get to your destination. And when you turn the car off, all of a sudden it's like, oh, you just realize how noisy it was, or how there was this thing that was just like vibrating or running for the last 3 hours straight. And it's only when it stops do you go, oh, wow, it's so peaceful. And it's a bit like that right now with what's happening physically or somatically, where I'm like, there's this, when I'm really quiet and calm, that's what I start to feel this like, and it moves around my body. And every now and then, what it only seems to happen a few weeks ago. It doesn't happen very often. It'll just stop for like 1 second and then it starts up again. And so I've been curious. I'm like, what is this? Is this like a background, like on edge? Like I'm sort of exploring it and trying to, get to know it, I suppose. But I'm curious if have you noticed anything like that with yourself? Any sensations or experiences like that?
Yeah, I'm curious. Like for me, I would language it different, but I can relate to it. Or let's see if I'm projecting. But for me, let's say 3 years ago, like that sound or that feeling inside myself, there was so much fear. It was like a complete stuckness. Like imagine like there's no movement and no flow anymore. It's like it's completely like coming to a halt, and therefore like the liveness was completely gone. And then realizing that this fear, like I had to be like, I had insomnia, I had like confusion and doubts and just a lot of guilt and a lot of shame. And slowly by actually like I had to, especially at night, I had to be with the sensations because they were so vulnerable. Like during the day I could pretend and function, but in the night I really had no choice than to be with it and just slowly start to embrace it actually. And I tried everything to get rid of it. It was not working. That's also how I found into somatics, like really to come to a place of really embracing it and befriending. And that's when I feel now it's actually the very same energy. What was stuck then under this big fear is just being this, it's like it's opening up and it's becoming this humming, this buzzing of like, it's alive and I can meet it and go to its very edge. Well, before I would be like, oh, I cannot meet the edge. I'm losing control. I need to make a decision and say no, so I will not fail. But actually the shift is like, well, what if it's actually allowed to be let loose? And before I would also have this strong moments where I would cry in the airport and suddenly like let go of emotions and feelings that I would before try to repress. And it just had to come out until I was like comfortable in public spaces and with friends. And now it's just much more subtle. It's much more, it doesn't have to come to the surface so strong anymore, but it still wants to be felt and seen, but it seems to be less dramatic. And so it's like this buzzing in me. It feels like I can still see like, oh, the fear is coming up again. Can I allow that and see actually with curiosity where it brings me? And yeah, well, it comes then it's really like naming, for example, like what I want or what I don't want, what I can and what I cannot. So really becoming more able to communicate what's already alive rather than trying to manipulate or get things out of other people or of a situation, and saying to a person like, a woman that I find really attractive, like, hey, I'm not open for a relationship and I'm not available, or I want to have, I want to kiss you. Is that okay with you? Or like, this is really challenging for me. It's not working, like with a friend in a conversation. And really naming that. And that's where the aliveness is really coming up. And I find a lot of joy in finding the edge again and again.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's interesting you mentioned like stuckness, because the way I described that feeling to my friend was like, another way to describe it would be like a car with the handbrake on and the accelerator to the floor. It's like some part of me is like, let's go. And then another part's like, no.
So for me, what you're just relating now, if I can language that like with not a car and like the handbrake, it's like there's just the unconscious, which is my animal body that's want to go wild, and just do everything. And then there's my mind's like, you cannot go crazy. There's not just sex, rock and roll. Like you have to inhibit. And so this is like what you come into balance with. Like, can they meet together and have a communication? Because that's when you become more, they can harness from each other.
Yeah. Well, that's why, I've noticed like sometimes I have this, this is why it's been such a roller coaster these last few weeks, because sometimes my mind gets thinks, oh, it'd be so much better if this just stopped. I'm like, hang on, do you even know if that's what needs to happen? Yeah, forever gone. I'm like, I don't even know what it is. Maybe it doesn't need to stop. I don't fucking know. I just know that it's there. And I know that my tendency is to wrap a story around that and think, oh, that's the reason for to demonize that. And if only that was gone, then I would be happy and healthy and I could do all the things that I want to do. Instead going, hang on. I mean, it is fun to I do like playing with it, like kind of go, okay, what is it? Like that's the somatic thing. Okay, well, what does it look like? You know, if it was an object, what kind of object would it be? What color is it? What shape is it? Is it moving? Is it still? And then starting to kind of be like, okay, how do we, how can we help this? Maybe not get rid of it, but at least, just allow it to have more space, for example, and I wonder if that's why that's also the somatic thing. A lot of this stuff, when we're numb, we don't feel it at all. It doesn't mean it's not there. You go ask a lot of people, like, do you have trauma? And they'd be like, no, I don't have any trauma. I'm like, yeah, well, I beg to differ. But it's because they're not feeling it. You start to feel it. And like, if it's coming up, there's something there. It's just trying to it's this real, I don't know what you say when people ask you questions like this, but when people ask me about how do I deal with this or that, I'm like, I don't know. Like I've seen my teachers have stuff like this and they don't know how, it's like a dance of well, let's try a bit of this and try a bit of that and play around with it and be open. And it's not here's the formula. If you just do these 3 things, it's just going to fix it because you don't even know what it is. I'm like, it's just such a trip, man. And it comes up at night. It wakes me up at night. That's probably the main time I feel it. Falling asleep, then I'll fall asleep, wake up an hour or 2 later and it's like, oh, hey, what's going on? Body's
absolutely
fall asleep again. Happens another couple hours later. And I think the lack of carbs is, I don't know if it's been causing that or it's just you take away the carbs, then there's less, because carbs release serotonin. There's a feel-good thing. That's why people, when they're stressed, they go and eat carbs. So you take that away, then I'm thinking, okay, now this thing can start to, now it's like, oh, great, I can express now. I can tell you all about my story at 3 a.m. in the morning.
Well, I think for me, when you say that, there's the typical approach would be, let's say my uncle, he has sleeping problems and he would wake up like you at 3 o'clock. And his approach would be, I'm taking a sleeping pill, I'm drinking a bit more alcohol, or I'm watching something on Netflix. It's how can you take care of that in the way of how can I get rid of that in order to function again the next morning? And I feel on a society level, there's more and more people that it's not working for them anymore, or actually the physical body gets to problems like migraine, or you have an ulcer or cancer or whatever comes up on a physical level that you cannot deny that something is not working for you. And I feel that's where we're heading collectively, and that's where, for me, there's so many modalities and the dark root is just one of them, of where do you find a safe place? Because for me, that was a really big aha moment of realizing, oh, wow, when I'm sleeping, it's actually where I'm going in a dream state, where I'm going into the subconscious naturally. And the body is actually very, very vulnerable. And in that vulnerability, symptoms and sensations are coming up, which I normally I don't have space for it. I'm not allowing it. And so for me, 2 years ago, when I was such in a bad place and I was thinking of shutting the Hermitage down, or I didn't know how to live life anymore to a degree, I was really afraid of that this is the end. And the fears were just, I have all these tools of meditation, yoga and breathwork, but nothing was working. And so really coming to a place where we need all safe places. If that's you as a person, that you are exemplify with really sharing your spectrum of feelings and emotions and how you're willing to look at them and saying, hey, that's part of me. That makes me a full human being. And there's nothing to deny about that. That gives room for an authentic conversation that somebody can come to you and say, actually, I have all these things which I haven't named to somebody else. And I just see that the need for this authenticity of really to bring the fullness to really parts that we don't even understand ourselves or don't even have language for. And I think for myself, when I was meditating, I did 10 days and 49 days retreat in silence. I didn't have the capacity then to feel. But it was a build up to where I am now. So I don't see my spiritual bypassing as a failure. They serve as great stories of to bring me where I am now. And is it the solution? No, but it's important nevertheless. And I think that's the funny thing. The dark retreat is also not the solution. Is there a solution? There is no magic pill.
Yeah. I don't know if it ever ends. The people I talk to, doesn't sound like it ever ends. We're talking about stress. As long as you're on Earth.
We're talking about stress.
It seems like there's going to be stress there, people dying, people living. It's interesting you mentioned sleep, because one reason I think this stuff can come up at night is it's like our defenses are down, all the ego. It's like the ego is disabled while we're asleep. Maybe it's active in the dreams, but like I think I do a lot of. I've done a lot of work with the plants here. You do like a dieta or diet, they call it, not just like a warm up for like a retreat, but an actual you put a plant inside you permanently. As weird as that sounds to some people listening, I'm sure. And a big part of that work is the processing that happens in the dreams. So whether it's like if there's fear that's come up, there'll be a terrifying dream, for example. That's how I see it, is like this dream. It's like I wasn't able to feel that in my awake state because my walls and my arm is up. Like even unconscious stuff. I'm not doing it consciously. And so I think that's why I tend to think this stuff can happen often happens at night, because it's like, well, yeah, all the defenses are down, all the mind's out of the way. It's like, okay, now we can go to work. Now we can process this thing. But there are times where, do you get this where like, sometimes I'm just like, oh man, can I just have a break? Like just for a day, like give me like one day a week. Let me just not have to feel any unpleasant stuff. Just totally relaxed, completely, totally relaxed. One day a month, even. One day, just something where it's totally, completely relaxed. I'm happy to process. I'm happy to feel my emotions. Sometimes it's just a bit like all the time, though. Do you ever feel like that?
Yeah, I had there's so many stories. Like when I was in the monastery, I was so convinced that I'm the chosen one and I have chosen the right religion and I will be enlightened and like I have found my path and everybody else is a failure. And it goes on to like, how long are you meditating? I'm doing 2 hours and you do none. Like this spiritual like superiority, or like I'm not eating meat. And it just has evolved a lot. And it's interesting of like, for example, it's just so good to now, for example, I'm doing like since 5 months, there's no sugar. And I have every week, like I have a pizza night or I just go out. Like I was just in Mexico in San Chris, like I had some alcohol, I had desserts, and it's like, I'm coming to this place of like shamelessly enjoying. And it's not even about breaking rules. It's just about, I'm not 100%. It's like, it's actually not possible to be 100% sugar free. Like I need an outlet. I need to have a break. I need to go and dance and have fun. And like, I'm human and I want to come back because it really is great for me. It serves on so many levels to not eat sugar. And I want to continue. I've never felt so good and so clear in my mind. And I remember so much better. And like, also my capacity to hold dark retreats. And yeah, like, of course I want to break. I'm a human. I want to have fun. I want to make love. Like I have an animal side. I have a feminine side. Like there's all these parts in me that want to be satisfied. It's not just one part. And it's fun. Where I was like years ago, I was so stuck in I cannot start my day without my practice because I'm not on my spiritual line. It's like, it was really, really like, yeah, it was hard. And I was very much in my own bubble of like, who are the people that are good and in my degree and who are the people I don't want to. It's like such a superiority.
Man, I've been there. I used to be me too. I had to get up and do my morning routine. If I didn't do my morning routine, I'd feel all out of sorts. And now it's been like, actually one of my teachers talked about this recently. She said one of her teachers, Kathy Kane, like a chick in the somatic world. And she was saying like the point of this work is ultimately so you can just get up and go about your day. It's not about like a new practice that you have to do at 8 o'clock every morning for 45 minutes exactly with a candle. And no, it's like getting you to the point where you're so healthy and you're so regulated that you don't need a consistent daily practice of anything to feel healthy and good. And I thought that was a really beautiful way to put it.
Absolutely. And we all need tools to understand or to mimic what does like healthy regulation mean. And then like it's not the solution either. And that's also where I feel like the dark retreat gives you a sensation. Like the breathwork gives you an experience that's very profound, and breath is very, very important. And so it's like it's always there with you, or like just coming into your body with yoga or meditation. They're all very relevant. And like, what's the best preparation to go in the dark retreat? That's like, or like what you're doing as well. Like, I love what you're sharing in your academy. It's like, yes, you can learn all these tools, but actually, are they bringing you closer to feel and to be actually sensing what's alive in you? Are you in connection with yourself, or actually are you using your exercises or whatever your tools are to get rid of what's actually already alive? And I think that's where I have blind spots. Like I have teachers, like they need to tell me where I'm missing it. again and again and telling me, hey, actually, like, you know all the tools, but you're still doing it wrong. And yeah, that's where the beauty comes in of like, we all have to help each other to a degree. And also we have to find regulation within our nervous system. Yeah.
I mean, it's funny. Like I've noticed on this path, it's like, it seems like the goal is like an integration of mind and body, integration of thinking and feeling. And as that develops and becomes like understood, like as a skill, it's like, I don't have a guitar in here right now, but like at first you learn through thinking about it and planning it out. But at some point it's automatic. There's no thinking required.
Yes.
It's who you are. And I feel like that's almost what we're getting at is at some point it's like, it doesn't really matter what technique or what tool you use to learn how to do it. The point is that you learn how to be embodied, be in feeling and thinking integrated. And then what you do from there is whatever the hell you want.
Yeah. And just enjoy that because it takes away the importance or the deep significance of all the traditions, which in my eyes are great. And then still it's like food. Like you want to enjoy different flavors from different countries and you want to be nourished in the end. And it's not that one dish that is the ultimate and forever. I mean, how boring. I love food. Couldn't eat always the same thing.
I'm eating the same thing every day. I'm about to go eat a bowl of mincemeat and salt. Delicious. And it's what I had yesterday. It's what I've had every day for the last 6 weeks. Anyway, let's wrap it up. So if people want to learn more about you and maybe they want to do a dark retreat, maybe they just want to reach out and say hello, where are the best place for them to do that?
Yes, you can find my retreat center, The Hermitage, on thehermitageretreats.com. That's where you can sign up to do a dark retreat with me. I would be happy to offer you and hold space for you to do a dark retreat. And there's limited spaces. We have more space in 2025. And yes, I also love to work with people one-on-one. That's actually something that I really enjoy, like to support people to their ongoing process. And yeah, I work also as an astrologer and I work with people's patterns and shadows and life processes. And that's also on the same website. That's where you can find me.
So one-on-one, you mean like as a coach or therapist type of role?
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm always curious because I'm a bit of a skeptic when it comes to a lot of things. I know we've got to go in a second. We said we'd wrap it up in a few minutes, but give me how do I say this? I've always been just really skeptical of astrology. And so I hear that.
Go ahead. What's the line? Bring it.
What's the benefit? Because to me, it seems like astrology is just a bunch of mental masturbation, to be blunt. How would you explain it to someone who's quite skeptical? Why? I love
to work with skepticals. Like for me, like I was never thinking that astrology would be something that I'm interested in. I thought it's just hocus pocus and like nonsense. And so there was the horoscope that I was like, come on, you cannot define me just by giving me like a short, like, oh, now you know who I am. And well, it's sad because astrology is actually very, very complex. And so if I would just wrap it up, we're going in a complete other theme, I would be happy to talk with you more about. But I'm not trying to convince you. But what I want to say is like, astrology is not about planets telling you who you are. Imagine like archetypes. Archetypes is actually like an inner kingdom that you have, inner parts that are alive. And that the planets are just representing inner parts that are alive in you. So they have no control or no power over you. They just point you to something that's already alive within you and give you language for what's happening anyway. And so astrology is actually, it's like, gives language for cycles in your life. And you are the expert. I don't like so many astrologers to just tell you, like teacher, just, this is the download and now here is the answer. I don't have that for you. Like you are the expert, you live in your body and you're telling me if that's true for you, I can find out with you together because I have tools and like I can ask you questions which you might not see. But it's actually like when you come around, like let's say over 40, you start to see that some themes in your life happen again, maybe on a higher level, but it's like there's some core dynamics happening again and again. And so you find that out yourself. You don't need astrology for that. And I can wrap that up. I can make it more efficient and be much more clinical and detailed and precise to give language for some dynamics that you just took a lot of time to make them become conscious from the unconscious. And so it's like I'm a compass in order that you come to the fullest version who you're meant to be. What that is, well, that's yours to find out, not mine, but I can support you on that journey. And that's not the mainstream astrology that I'm teaching. Like, I have been studying since 12 years astrology, and I like to go deep with people. And what we see in the mainstream media is just nonsense astrology of like, here, have some nice things. And that's not how I work.
Good to know. So I'll have, with that in mind, I'll have links to the hermitageretreats.com on Raychart under your podcast page. And so if people want to learn more about you, they can go straight to the hermitageretreats.com or go to Raychart, go to the podcast page and find the podcast that we've done here. And if you want to learn more about Raychart, that's all at Raychart, like Braveheart, but ragehart.co. Thanks for coming on the show, Severin.
Thank you for having me, John.